Also, we'd be really good if we can use the chat function and the Q&A function in Zoom to discuss and ask questions as we're going through, especially during the presentation times and the discussion times. It can be quite useful to use that. We're also going to try and use Miro to capture some of our work. So I'm just pasting the link onto the chat there. So if you can actually get into Miro and get yourself familiar with it while we're going through, we will probably come back to that towards the second part of this session. Also, you got the minutes and the agenda on the link there, as we usually have for the RDA sessions. So please feel free to use that and put your comments and thoughts in there as well. All right, so if we can move on to the next slide, Timmy. Right, so this session really came about as a result of the discussions that we had when we were doing the COVID-19 community participation sub-working group. Once we were doing that, we realized that we didn't actually have that many working groups or interest groups within RDA that were focused around the citizen science as aspects. So we wanted to have this session to gauge sort of the feeling of what it might be and what the interest might be. Is there a role for RDA in citizen science, and what that might be, and what the interest might be from the community on maybe having something more tangible. All right, so we got a couple of talks to begin with, and then we'll move into a more discussion.
But before we do that, we wanted to understand a little bit who's in the audience. So who's with us? So we have just a couple of questions on Mentimeter, just to understand a little bit more about your domains and your involvement with the citizen science project. So if you go to menti.com, the code is 9594674. Just to understand a little bit, if anyone in the audience is working in specific domains, because we're going to talk about how different the approaches to citizen science are across various domains, and also to understand if there are any specific disciplinary perspectives that we should be discussing. So any questions that we might be expecting. So I see there are already answers to that. So a lot of you are from natural sciences, which obviously covers a whole lot of domains, but health sciences, social sciences, no one from engineering and technology, humanities, and also a similar amount of domain agnostic as from natural sciences. So that's very useful to know. Thank you. Just to see the other question was whether you have been involved in any citizen science projects or have worked with that. We know that it's quite challenging to actually pinpoint the meaning of citizen science in various domains and types of projects. So we would like to see if you have been involved in any projects or work that is in the area, and well, if the conversation will be useful in a practical terms for you. Okay, I see most of you have taken part. There are a few that haven't. Quite a few also that are not sure, and that's commonly, as I said, it's very difficult to define, or different. There are different ways of looking at citizen science projects, so that might be also a challenge to address and pinpoint. Okay, thank you very much for that. That's very useful information. We're gonna go back to the slides. So Kieran has presented the background and the objective of this meeting, and I think Eva is gonna talk to us about wider approaches to citizen science across different regions. I don't know, did you want to add anything, Kieran?
No, that's good.
Oh, sorry.
So you will take control of the slides, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for your interest in this session. Actually, I'm going to talk about the approaches to citizen science and research data management in different regions or in different associations, because it's how the citizen science work by association. And I will try to just have an overview what is going on, because well, I have to be honest, and I was expecting to have to invite these communities to present themselves, the Australian, the North American and the European communities in citizen science working group and research data management. And what we really wanted to do, talking with Kieran and Jimmy and all my colleagues in the COVID-19 working group that we were co-moderating, we were thinking that there are a lot of work out there, including public participation of citizens and no professional scientists, that they gather different aspects, and at the end they gather a lot of data. It could be because of an application, it could be because they have different interactions and different public participation or citizens engagement. But at the end, we don't know, we don't have any connection. And the objective of this workshop is to find out if we need to create yet another REA working group, yet another REA interest group, or we just have to make an effort to join these communities that they are already working there in research data management. If you go through, Jimmy. For example, this is the case of the Citizen Science Association in the US, that they are the ones that they created originally, the working group on data, metadata working group, and they are the ones that they are creating the public participation in scientific research standards. So if we always say that REA is not a standard organization, but we create or we try to align good practices. So perhaps we don't need to create yet another metadata standard, but perhaps it would be good to match if what they are doing in the public participation in scientific research standard can be aligned with what we are doing in another format, scientific research in data management. If we go to the next, we have the example of the European, what is going on in the European Citizen Science Association. It was in 2016, because they have a cost action, and there are people from the Joint Research Center in the European Commission that they are very much involved in that cost action. They created this activity about data and service infrastructure for citizen science. This is one of the previous work that they have done in 2016. If we go next, we can see the next step in the European context, which is the Geneva Declaration. Yes, yet another declaration. You know that when we work in open science, we keep all the time making declarations. It's like a normal activity for open scientists. But this declaration also gathers the minutes of a citizen science specific working group that they created to work in an ontology standard and data. We should probably align this work with the work that we are doing in REA in vocabularies, with the work that we are doing in REA in metadata, and try to align both to be compliant and treat the data coming from scientific, no professional roles at the same level as the ones that they are coming from scientific practices. And if we come to the next one, we will see the Australian initiative, which is mostly the same, that they are creating another working group in the Australian context that is led by Peter Brenton, that we were thinking on having him today. Kieran and I, we have a very, very interesting discussion with him about this, and he's very interested, but he couldn't only attend this meeting because he wasn't prepared to attend the whole REA conference. So it was going to be disappointing that we couldn't open it up at the doors of the conference for other communities. And also, if we go to the global aspects in the next slide, we can see that we have this new declaration, yet another declaration that is just brand new. It was actually done by the SAMA, the European SAMA, and it was the big conference under the presidency of the German presidency of the Council, that it was focusing on citizen science and sustainable development goals. And if we go to the text, it's very interesting how there is a point that this approach to sustainable development goals from citizen science goes across countries and across thematic areas, which is something that I'm particularly interested, because I think citizen science can land on the world of data for agnostic domain, right? And also the importance of data quality management strategies, and also apply to the data management and data sharing practices, FAIR principles, and open data. But I think they are on top of the issues that they are, of course, really technical. If we go to the next slide, this is my last message. They are questions that they are very technical, which is what they are addressing in this public participation scientific research core data model, which is more than a metadata schema is a data model, including an ontology for mapping all these approaches on citizen science data. More than the technical aspect, I'm really concerned, and I think probably the approach on this group, it will be farther than the technical approach on metadata, on data management. Also, who is the owner of the data participation data? The citizen that is producing those data, the PI that is inviting these citizens to contribute with the data. For example, in the case of the COVID-19, we have apps for different countries that we have in our phones, and we are producing data that they are going to use by research. But who are the owners of this data? In which repository we have to gather the research data that they are coming from participation of the community. So I think there are many issues that we probably can join with this work done already in the community, in the technical level, and try to align other initiatives in the context of REA. That's the overview that I want to put on the table for you to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Eva, perhaps you would like to also introduce the video from Oscar.
Well, yes, this is another previous conversation when we were preparing this BoF, and we really wanted to invite Oscar Gocho, who is a full professor in the University Polytechnica of Madrid, that he's leading a very interesting project called Action, that exactly gathers what we are discussing here, citizen science practices and also research data. And he was so kind on recording on Saturday a video for us, just to put it on our door. And we open the door and he's here, but he's not participating. I will just take notes for all your questions to pass over to him. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody, and sorry for not being able to be over there with you today. Eva told me that it may be a good idea to share my opinion with you with respect to what we can consider in terms of fair and open data for citizen science. So I thought that I could just tell you a little bit about how we view how fair and open data has to be in the context of citizen science projects, and specifically in one of the projects that we are working on right now, which is Action. So I think that if I have to start with something, I would start really with our point of view. Yeah, why is it important to for those who are designing citizen science projects to consider the FAIR principles and especially openness. We really think that there are two main reasons for this. I mean, in the end, if we really want to convince people that citizen science projects are doing science and many other things as well, we really have to be doing what science is doing, yeah, and then promoting fair and openness with this idea of as open as possible, as close as necessary, is really a must. The second thing is that, I have the view that citizens collaborate in general for free to help science. And as a result, their data should be open. I mean, I don't really believe that data should be closed, because then, I mean, in my own case, if the data is closed, I do not play. Obviously, I mean, like the results may go under some embargo period. I mean, you have been the one who has designed the project, you have put effort, sometimes even money. So you may have a competitive advantage over other researchers that are working in the same area. But this does not mean that the data should not be open in the end, yeah? So if we go into understanding or analyzing why isn't this happening in citizen science projects? I mean, like we have been reviewing plenty of citizen science projects and their data management approaches, and we have realized that they are not opening their data, they are not making their data fair. Probably, I mean, I would really say that the main reason is that the project leaders are not necessarily professional scientists, or even if they are, they have sometimes issues with all these things, yeah, like what is a data management plan? So I mean, like sometimes they have even been asking us, can you give me one of those almost filled in? Yeah, because I mean, my project is not necessarily different to many other projects. They do not necessarily know how data repositories work, as many other professional scientists as well, or how much metadata should we put there, or what does FAIR mean, yeah? So what we are trying to do in the context of Action is to provide a toolkit that takes into account the participatory science life cycle, typical steps in science, and trying to give some indications to all those people who are running citizen science projects on what they should be doing. Now the self-advertisement part of my presentation, very quickly. Which are the things that you can find and which are the things that you can ask me for? And I mean, I would really love to have a discussion on these things, yeah? Some of the things that we have been doing in this project and that we are going to be maintaining even after the end of the projects are a tool, templates, and a tool for generating data management plans for citizen science projects. For instance, one of the key elements over there is, what are you willing to do with your data, with the data that you collect from people or the data that they help you validate and so on. We are also creating a data portal for all the incubated citizen science projects inside the Action. You can see over there the URL. And this is based on Zenodo communities. So it is even going beyond the extension of the Action project because it is going, well, I mean, to some of the communities that we can generate in Zenodo so that people can upload their data. We are also building research object management tools. I mean, it's not only data, it's also the software that people are building, the Jupyter notebooks, presentations, all the materials. We want to put them together so that citizen science project leaders can explain exactly what is going on inside their project. And finally, we are creating lots of webinars in this context. So, I mean, if you are interested in any of them, also let us know or go to the Action Project website and you will see it. This was the self-advertisement part. Yeah? In general, I mean, again, going back into the general overview that I was telling you at the very beginning, I really think that all the data that is being contributed by citizen scientists has to be open at some point in time, has to be fair, and this should be a must for instance, funders to provide funding for these projects. Thanks a lot, and I hope that I mean, this will spark also some discussion, and really looking forward to seeing the summary of those discussions. Thanks, Eva, and the rest of the team for inviting me. Bye.
Right. Now, next up, we got Joanne, who's going to give a brief update about patient and public involvement in research. So, Joanne, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Do I need to do something for the video, or is it going to come up? I'll just talk. Hi, so I was part of the COVID-19 Community Participation Working Group. I was one of the co-moderators, and I'm from the University of Nottingham. I'm assistant professor there, but one of my roles is I'm patient and public involvement lead for the NIHR Biomedical Research Centre in Musculoskeletal Research. And for me, public and patient involvement is really important in medical research. And I feel that there's lots of elements which can be applied to research data management in general, and particular to citizen science. Can we go to the next slide, well, please? Thank you. So through involving members of the community in developing a research project, you get the best product, the best research proposal out there. It's even better if you can co-produce it with a member of the public, and it enables you to develop a research question that's really important to the people that you're wanting to collect the data about, and that you ultimately want to hope to help. When you involve members of the public in designing your research, you consider there's research priorities that they suggest that you haven't considered previously. They help you see the bigger picture of how you can convey your proposal, or when you write it, the article that you're wanting to write. And one of the things that I think we need to get across, especially when I do it with students, is it actually gets you excited about your research when you meet the people that you're trying to help. So my PhD is in cellular molecular biology. It was in asthma research. I never met anybody who had asthma. And then when you actually meet someone, even though it's just a common condition, you meet someone with the condition and you see how much it affects their lives. And when you go back to the lab, you're really motivated to get on with the work, because you can see how it can make a difference to somebody. So I find that having PPI, even though at the beginning you think, oh, this is a bit of a chore having to do PPI for a grant application, it motivates you. You get so much more out of it. And nowadays, PPI is a requirement not only for grant applications, but your ethics applications, and many journals, for example, the BMJ, it's a requirement for publication. So even if you've got the best research project, if you haven't done PPI, it's not going to get published in the best journals nowadays. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? So there's 3 different roles that the public or citizens can be involved in research. I am talking from a medical research point of view throughout this session, but I think it can apply to all research that involves the public and citizens. So there's 3 different roles. The first one is involvement, which should be, if you look at the top right-hand corner photo, should be throughout the life cycle of the research project. So right at the beginning, when you're deciding on what your research question is going to be, you should involve members of the public in there. They should help design the question. They should, it should be, say, worthwhile and meaningful for them. What people used to do, and some people still do, is they get the research group, they come up with the question, they plan it all completely, and then they realize they should do PPI, and they just get someone in to read it the day before it gets submitted, and just like rubber stamp it and say, yeah, that's good. And that's not how you're supposed to involve the public in your research. The middle photo is participation, which is one of the ways that, or the most common way that people think that the public can be involved in research, is actually collecting the data, being the citizen scientist or being the participant. And then the third one is engagement, which again is often overlooked. It's the disseminating of the results afterwards. So we're all really good at going to conferences and disseminating or getting a publication in a peer-reviewed journal, but we're not good at actually getting the results of the study out to the people who it could make a difference to, but also the people that have collected the data. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of the ways that citizen scientists can actually, or PPI reps could contribute to citizen science. So they could advise you on where to recruit. So it could be a population that you don't really have access to. They can advise the best way to get them there. It could be that you need to get into a community, to meet a community leader and get them to promote them within the population you're trying to look at to. And the PPI representatives are someone that can give you advice of how to get in there. They can advise you how to recruit your participants, what sort of incentives can work, because often we find we want to give vouchers, or you can go into a prize draw. And depending on the population we're trying to recruit from, they, especially for medical research, they don't want to take any money from medical research, and they'd rather not have the opportunity to win a £50 gift voucher. They'd rather it all go to helping people. So actually, to give an incentive, sort of disincentivize those populations. And by speaking to the population that you're trying to recruit, you get to learn these sort of things. The other thing they can help with is maintaining engagement and participation. It's all well and good to recruit someone for your baseline measurement, but if people aren't going to keep using the app, filling in the survey, not doing it in the subsequent weeks and months, it's no good. So the PPI reps can help with this. They help with the language that's used, especially with citizen scientists. If you're not there having to, as a researcher, being able to explain what the terms mean and what you actually meant, it can be a bit ambiguous in some of the questions. Having a PPI rep to review the questions first and to make it clear and sort of troubleshoot the app first and see how user-friendly it is, that's very helpful. And then also, again, the advising on the methods of collection. So whether you should use a mobile app, a web-based questionnaire, paper questionnaire, whether you should ask for text messages or you should call them up. They can advise on these sort of things, which would be best for the population you're trying to recruit from. Okay, and the next slide, please. Okay, so the other things that that PPI reps can help with is concerns about confidentiality. I think, especially if we think now of COVID, especially in the UK, there's an app, the track and trace app, that they want us all to put on your phone. And in spite of everyone giving all their data to Facebook and seem quite happy to do that, they're all becoming like worried at the moment of sharing their data because they think the government's going to get it. So actually, the PPI reps can give you advice on, or concerns that the public have of why they might not want to take part in your study or share their data. And as much as we're all up for open data sharing, and as we've heard from the previous speakers, they don't want to get involved unless there's open data sharing. As a member of the public, are you happy, if you're not a researcher and you're not aware of the procedures that are in place, do you want your data to be openly shared, and who with? I know a lot of the people we have are scared about it being shared with insurance companies, any data that they provide to us, and their medical and health records. So whilst it's good to have open data, that's something you have to be concerned with as trying to involve the citizen scientists, because they're not also open for that. They also want to know if, with the data in the future, who's it going to be shared with? Who's going to be the data custodian? Is it the funder, the pharmaceutical company, the university that's sponsoring it, the PI? And if they decide they no longer want to be involved, what happens to their data? If they withdraw consent, is all their data withdrawn, or only any future data won't be collected? So that's something, as a scientist, we generally say, if you provided the data, if we started to analyze it, that's it, you can't withdraw it, because that could keep going on forever, people withdrawing it, and you could never get around to publishing because your data is always being changed. But then you can see it from a citizen's point of view. If they no longer want to give that data, they should be allowed to withdraw it. And then also how long the data is going to be stored. So with COVID, this is one of the things, people that weren't really scientists, they were app developers, were developing this and said, as soon as the pandemic's over, your data is going to be deleted. But actually, as a researcher, you're saying, well, actually, we might want to keep it on because there might be another pandemic in 3 years' time. And we're going to say, we actually want to look at past data and see how things developed and how the disease spread. And so actually we want to keep this data. So we want the data for 7 years. And so you have to weigh up the pros and cons, and we've got to come to some decision on what do we do with this citizen science data. And then the final point I want to get across is the communication. So we're always wanting things from the citizen scientists. The people are always giving us their data, but we need to give something back to them. So it could be just an altruistic reason why they're doing it, but some people, especially on a widespread population, they need to get something back. So it might be that every week you give them, if they're doing an app, they get a result of, this is, I don't know, say the walk, how much walking you've done this week. It says, you've done 5 miles this week, you've walked 5 miles, and then say, in the general population of people your age, they've been doing 4 miles. Well done, you're doing more. That sort of feedback. But then equally, we want to know on a nationwide level, what's happening. So again, for the COVID app, people want to know each week what's happening with the COVID levels. Are the cases rising? But we need to be careful on the way that we then disseminate this data back. If we give it back to them in a raw form that they can't understand, that can equally be as bad as giving them nothing. But we should be able to find a way to disseminate to the wider community and to population and to policymakers. And I think just go to the last slide. Good. So just a few considerations. If you're going to do citizen science, you need to have a clear justification and aim for why you're going to involve the citizens in your research project. You need to come up with your question in collaboration with people from outside the research community. Not so we do become quite insular, so it's good to get out there and find out the people we're trying to help. And again, involve partnerships and organizations that can enhance the outcome of your project. And also, we always recommend that a member of the research team, or at least someone on the study executive committee, should be a layperson, a scientist, citizen scientist or a community member, just to give that input. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. That was quite a lot of things in there that I didn't even realize till now. Thanks for that. I think next up we got Timia. He's going to talk about the dimensions of citizen science. Over to you, Timia.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joanne and Eva as well. You've presented different perspectives on citizen science. I'm just going to try to maybe summarize a couple of discussions that we've had under the citizen science, under the community participation working group that we had for COVID, and try to maybe narrow it down to a couple of challenges that we can address with a potential activity under the RDA. So you've both mentioned before types of engagement and participation and the roles, and we know that it's rather difficult to understand the various ways of engagement and ways to gauge community participation. So the common view that we always have around citizen science, or at least the traditional way of looking at it, was that citizens are the object of the studies and the data suppliers. But we've seen in recent years a growth in the engagement and participation of citizens as data collectors, also as data curators and stewards in terms of contributions to metadata and community archives. And we've also seen a growth in the number of citizens who participate to data investigation and scientific storytelling. So overall, everything falls under the under the overall goal of democratizing science and of opening science. But as you have mentioned, Joanne, and also Eva, there are many challenges that need to be addressed. So we're talking about issues of reward and acknowledgement, and of intellectual property when we're sort of looking at it from a more legal perspective. There's also the legitimacy and scientific integrity, data ownership and governance, which was one of the topics that we've discussed widely under the RDA COVID-19 community participation working group, and also another topic, that of the privacy and protecting the interest of the participants when they are subjects. So these are overall acknowledged challenges that we have. Perhaps a good way of looking at it would be to understand the term from a more disciplinary view. And when I've looked into this, I've realized how different approaches and understanding of citizen science is across various disciplines. So we have the biological sciences, where we have citizen scientists who are participating with observations, and it's a way of contributing that is widely acknowledged. We have, in the case of environmental science, a contribution more in terms of awareness raising, but also in empowering and enhancing society support for conservation. This is a sort of citizen science that is more of the activist nature. We have in medicine and health, as Joanne mentioned, citizens contributing via various digital technologies and sensors to the data collection. We have, in the case of social sciences, a long tradition of citizens being involved in survey-based research. In the humanities, there's been, at least especially recently, with the digital methods and with the sort of establishment of digital humanities, growth in contributions in the form of translations, quite oftenly in the forms of oral histories, and, as I mentioned, community archives. But then there is a completely different group that is particularly of interest to Eva, who is looking into aspects of interdisciplinary work, where we have these citizen observatories, or we have projects that are more related on responsible research and innovation, and cross-cutting and overarching aspects. Now, another way of looking and trying to make sense of citizen science is by understanding the outputs and the rewards and incentives and the drivers that are behind getting the citizens involved in science. Joanne has mentioned a few of those more on the researchers' part, in a sense that obviously it is rewarding to see the work that goes into helping the people, and that makes things a little bit easier also in the engagement and liaison directly with the subjects of the study itself. But beyond that, we have to be aware that in many cases, the citizen science projects do not have what we call a scholarly or scientific output. And that comes quite often with two disadvantages. So we don't have metrics, or at least in the term that is sort of established, we don't have metrics for tracking and acknowledgement for their contribution. And on the other hand, if our reference is the scholarly communication, we don't have visibility for these projects for the scientific community. So these are two things that are very important in terms of the outputs and of the rewards and incentives that bring together people under the umbrella of citizen science. Now, another way of looking at it, and possibly a path that would give us sort of a few milestones for our group, would be to look into the criteria that make a citizen science project rigorous. And that would help us obviously with the scientific community, and it would also help us with policymakers in taking the data and the outputs of the citizen science projects more seriously. Now, when we discuss these sort of criteria, some of the things that are on the research data community agenda come up. So are we talking about standards in terms to ensure rigor? Are we talking about DMPs, openness and transparency, quality control, metadata standards? What would help us achieve that sort of set of criteria that would help establish and give legitimacy to the community, to the citizen science projects? All of these are on the table and they're open for discussion, obviously. Now, there are also different rewards and outputs and reasons why we talk about citizen science. It is because We believe in citizen science as an education and outreach tool. It is one of the themes that are very important under the umbrella of open science. We believe that under the same dimension of open science, that citizen science is important for civic empowerment and also for the policy making that we talk about very often, that we wish would be more participatory. So these are also other dimensions, other lens to look at. And obviously, at the end, it all brings us to the question of trust, to the question of building the general trust in the scientific process as information is shared, is available, and people have access to knowledge, data, and feel that it's an inclusive process that is transparent and open. So I wanted to bring these few points up before we have our open discussion. We have set up a couple of questions that would help us possibly in maybe narrowing down what would be interesting themes across belonging to the wider theme of citizen science that possibly we can address together, and what would be very practical outputs that our group might be able to produce. So I don't know, Kiran, would you like to take over for the questions, or maybe I can move on? But possibly we might want to maybe bring again the point on Miro.
Yeah, so before we move on, there's a couple of questions that came up on chat for Joanne. Joanne, there's a question on there is asking, where do you find great PPI representatives?
Well, this is the whole point. It could be any member of the public, any member of the community that you're trying to engage with. We do, so in the UK, so I'm talking from a UK point of view, there's a website called People in Research, where you put your 250 words of what you want. There's people ready waiting. I post something, I go make a cup of tea, I come back and I've got 4 emails and the phone's ringing of people wanting to take part. There's an email list straight away. As soon as you post something, it's on Twitter. And for us, that's my best way. But also we have a team, so say I do musculoskeletal research, and we've got a team of about 100 people. We have something in the UK that started in Nottingham called ShareBank, which is free training for PPI representatives and for researchers to involve PPI members. So that there was in the UK, there's one called Involve for medical research, and that's how they can give you advice. So there's lots of information out there. I could tell you if you needed to. Is it someone that's paid? There's some issues with that. They're wanting to, so we pay them inconvenience money. So we'll pay their transport, we give them food and drink. If they're a carer, we'll pay for nurseries or carers, things like that. But we've got an issue. They're trying to make it that we have to pay them a certain amount of money, but it depends on your population. So if you're wanting to look at illegal immigrants or homeless people, to then say, we've got to register you, you've got to have a bank account to us to pay you money, we're not going to get access to these people. So we're trying to find different ways around this, but generally, no, they're not. They're volunteers. They do it altruistically. They want to be involved. Lots of people are retired. They're on maternity leave and they just want to get back and use their brains a bit. Or a lot of them use their skills that they've got in their regular job or what they had in their previous job. So people help you with admin, with ethics forms, with administration. There's just so much that the PPIs can help with. At the beginning, I say you do feel like it's an effort to involve them, and actually once you start using members of the public, they're such a great help. So yeah, that's it. I think I answered that. But if you do want to know, I can, there's the link, yes. I can share, I have hundreds of links because I teach PPI a lot to my students, so I can share all of those resources.
Thanks, Joanne, and some great comments in the chat as well around the use of the citizens into as part of the research process as well, and the eternal challenge that we have about the legitimacy of citizen science by the research discipline and the research practitioners itself. So those are really the comes to some of the heart of the questions and the challenges that we have. Now we got a group size of about 20, which is sort of small enough for us to have a discussion like this. I did set up the Miro board if we had a bigger group because it becomes a bit easier to do. Can I just get a quick word on whether people think it's better to stay in the single group in here and have a chat like this, or whether we wanted to go to the Miro board and use that as a focal point for our discussion?
Has anyone used the Miro board before? I think that would be
great question, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, wait.
okay.
Okay. Kimberly is saying, why don't we use the combination of that? And I think that's a good idea. So what we'll do, we got 3 questions that we've posed. Timmy, could you just slide through those questions in there while I talk? So if you get onto the Miro board, there's a section in there that gives a very quick introduction on how to use it. And I'll put the link to it back on the chat again. We'll just use it as the single breakout. So there's a section called breakout sessions. If you go into that, that's 1 question in each of those blue columns in there. It'd be nice if you can put your thoughts and as a sticky note. So if you press N on your computer or the toolbar on the left-hand side, you can create a sticky note and just put a sticky note on there with your thoughts and comments in there. And it might just take 5 minutes to get some thoughts in there from people.
Yeah. So as Kieran mentioned, we have prepared a couple of more than a couple of questions, but hopefully it's more when you try to put down your ideas, think about a few objectives that we might be able to address and maybe practical outputs. So we were thinking about, obviously there's always the issue about raising awareness about citizen science, and it's not only about, as we mentioned, about the collection of data, but it's also about data stewardship. So I think in the chat has also the issue about contributions and them not remaining invisible was one of the points that were raised. So possibly connected to that would be thinking about ways that we can support the acknowledgement of contributors to citizen science projects. And again, going back to an idea that that Joanne mentioned, the involvement of citizen science across the research data life cycle. So think of ways that that possibly we can address that and maybe pinpoint the issue. Do we want to go through all the questions, Kieran, and then see how those come out in the Miro?
Yes, let's walk through the questions. You want to run through each of the questions, Timmy?
Yeah. Do you want to take on the next one, or should I? It's okay either way.
You can go.
Okay, so again, another topic that we talked about regards the legitimacy of citizen science, because obviously that relates to the authority and also of the acknowledgement. So can we provide recommendations? This is a more specific questions related to metadata requirements and other considerations for citizen science. Are there also digital platforms that would enable the process by ensuring a standardized way of collecting the data, or actually workflows that would ensure the scientific sort of rigor that that we're looking for any scientific output. Rules and of participation and terms of reference. We've asked in the beginning if any of you have taken part in similar citizen science projects. So if you have, and you have any examples of things that have worked and things that can be maybe expanded across the board, or things that should be made more specific for research data, that would be information that that we can work with, and it would be an interesting objective to set for the working group. Also, obviously, when we talk about legitimacy and scientific rigor, we also have to think about the skills. So maybe we can think of a catalog, or defining what sort of skills are needed in citizen science projects, in order to ensure, obviously, the legitimacy and the rigor that we are aiming for. Obviously, there's
before we move on, I think people are just getting a little bit lost in the mirror board.
Okay.
So we might briefly bring the discussion back here and pause on each question and discuss that through, yeah?
Okay. I see Gabi has put a question in the chat. So how can we create capabilities for citizens to get involved in our science projects, but not guide them to create knowledge as we want? Yeah, I think it goes back again to the idea of establishing a set of criteria that would help people navigate on both sides of the spectrum. So the researchers themselves who look for collaborations with citizen science, and also with on the side of the citizens who are looking to get involved into these sort of projects. So frameworks that possibly help all sides to better engage and set terms of reference or rules of participation that would be useful, I think. Has anyone in your experience worked with such set of rules of participation or guidelines that were really effective? So that would be very, very interesting to know.
So if anyone wants to speak, just raise your hand and we can.
Yes, please turn on also your cameras. That would be very useful for us to see who we are speaking to. And
Hi, Gabi, go ahead.
yes.
Okay. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Well, I work in Universidad Nacional in Costa Rica, and I think that's my comment before that is that I feel that a lot of people that work with citizens doing kind of citizen science or things like that, or participation of open their research to the participation of people, is that what they try to do is to, I don't know how to say it, to involve people as participants, but as helpers, not as a creator of knowledge. My experience, we have an interesting experience with an indigenous plan that we did some while ago for the university and the universities of Costa Rica, and we did it with people. And it was very interesting that the indigenous people will think different, will have a different approach about the plan, and how we manage to discuss and to have that dialogue, because our point of view could be different from their point of view, and then how we become how we can construct something that all of us agree, and that we go with the line of the point of view of us both as one plan. Okay, and I think that was one of the more difficult things that we did, like to get to one point of view, different points of view, because we have 8 indigenous people in Costa Rica. Then each one of them have different points of view, and it's not that one is good and the other is not. That is a lot of our academic point of view. We are yes, we are right. Okay, we have the good point of view, and that's all. And I think that experience was very helpful for us to understand how to do that ecology of knowledge, that dialogue where you have to construct and you have to consider the other are legitimate.
Yeah, that's a very, very valid point, Abby, and one that keeps popping up in, I think, all the disciplines that I keep touching on as well.
Yeah, we do have the same issue in the case of oral histories. So collecting that sort of information without asking the questions in a certain way that would guide the discussion, but letting whoever you're talking to obviously speak their mind, because that's the most accurate perspective. So the Digital Repository of Ireland, where I work, has long been involved in oral histories, and we were trying to pull out this sort of guidelines for oral historians, and also for specific themes that would help this sort of conversation in a way that as you say, is not invasive, but still guides towards the results that we're hoping to get out of the specific research. So it is challenging, but it is rewarding at the same time, and I'm sure you know that. Vera, I think you have your hand up, so yes. I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry.
Very good.
I'm also working in National University, and we, since some years, I'm working in a project that I think it's an interesting approach to citizen science, because it's a database for arts. I'm working in arts, where anyone, any community or any artist can upload his works with a lot of descriptions. We made it we started it by the view of a community archive, because there's a lot of things, but not a specific community, but starting with Costa Rica, but giving the opportunity to anyone. And we made a lot of projects, a little bit like this. It were artistic projects, and a lot of time in arts, you can't differentiate. There's not a clear difference between investigation and data, because the data sometimes is a result. So this is a difficult part for us, the difference between data and the result, because they tend to mix up because of the characteristics of arts. But viewing it from the point of view of the citizen science, it ends up being like two parallel projects connected, because when we are really the times we made a really successful work with communities, there was our work, they fully understand it, and their point of view and what they wanted to do, we fully understand it, and they connected in the archive. But there were two projects, and our responsibility as university sometimes it was to help them to make their project while we were doing our project. That ends up being a lot of work and a little bit complex, but in a very good relationship that we can go on working later on. And in the middle, we created an archive. There were no other way to create this archive. It's a little bit complex for us, because data in arts is not strictly data. but it was a very interesting experience, and all the points you mentioned, all this was into it. It's a really, it came out a citizen science project.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't sure if I was unmuted. Yep, I think one way of looking at it would be that, as you say, maybe it's not the data. So whatever input you have, the objects themselves are the data, but you as a researcher are the one who curates the metadata. So all the sort of scientifically rigorous information that is on the objects that people contribute with. It sounds very interesting.
The most interesting part is that in the end, it were two projects connected. And this was a way to connect this community, respect their project because they had a project. Somehow they had a project. And make them to respect our project, and this way working together. This is what was really worked.
Yeah, and I guess to some extent that this answers also, or is it a way of answering what Gabby was bringing on? So how to be true to their point of view and still be true to your objectives as a researcher as well. So, yeah, Eva, please. I see you have your hand raised. Thank you very much.
Myself, I have a comment on your. Thank you very much, Vera and Gabby, for your insights, and I think it's fantastic that there are people in Costa Rica is joining us, even if we cannot join you in your country. Thank you very much for participating and being part of the REA community. But I think what you put on the table is something that came up with our discussions at the beginning, that the problems that arise with citizen science data, they are the problems that arise with other scientific data. So for example, what you said, Vera, about what is data for arts or for creative arts. This is a question that you can have as a researcher, or a question that I can have a participant in your research. So I think the point of this working group, this BoF, or this topic on the table is how can we join the citizen science in a parallel basis at the same time that we are addressing all the projects on all the working groups in REA. For example, if you think about, I don't know, just for example, metadata working group or vocabularies working group to talk about things that I'm keen on, you have to say, should we create a metadata for citizen science data group, legal issues for citizen science data? Should we put this surname in every single group of REA, or all the way around? Should we bring in every single working group or in every single interest group the topic of citizen science data as a must, as a transversal thing? That's a question to discuss and come up with something on the community. Thank you.
Does anyone have thoughts on that?
A good way, I think, would also be to maybe try to collect use cases. Your example is really good, and I think it's very, very insightful. Possibly under different disciplines, there are similar examples, so we can draw some parallels. I don't know, it's just a thought.
Well, a thought that occurred to me as Siva was talking about that was that maybe they, I like the idea of that it being a transversal, that it become part of every other working group or interest group as a subtopic in there. But without a lack of a focal point, I think it never really will materialize. So there may be a role for a citizen science interest group, I think, that has that as a focus, and maybe bring all those use cases together and then have the conversations with the other working groups and interest groups around, what can be done in say legal stream for around a certain use case. And then that also brings much more focus for everybody rather than being what do we do for citizen science? It's very broad, it's very hard to think of it that way.
But probably that is a working group. It's something that has a beginning and an end. Imagine, I'm just thinking on the statement. The aim of this working group is collecting in different use cases where citizen science data have to have a special thinking on all the transversal topics. So it will be going one by one, all the interest groups and the working groups, so they are a few, 90 something, and try to make a use case or an interpretation of the issues that they are treated there on the basis of citizen science data. And at the end, bring up a collection of use cases and how to address these things. And also, I don't know, I cannot envision what will be the practical way to present this to the community as a useful outcome. So who will embrace these use cases? The citizen scientists are going to take a part of this, or is something like another attention? One of the questions that really is important is that now in the European perspective, in the new Horizon Europe, which is the new work program for the research funding in Europe, for those that you are not European, the citizen science is going to be considered a transversal issue in every single project. So that's why I'm so interested in addressing, for example, if you're going to do a data management plan, consider your data coming from public participation too. For example, Oscar was saying that in his project in Action, they are creating a data management plan application for citizen science. But I have to discuss this with him because I think it's a wonderful idea, but I don't think the data scientists, I don't think the citizen scientists become the data scientists. They are not going to be part of the process of creating a data management plan. And why we need another tool to create a data management plan differently of the other data. At the end, I'm thinking always in integration. For me, citizen science data are kind of the something like the long tail of science, but they have to be addressed also in the common disciplines.
Yeah, and probably it should be one of probably it should be actually one of the aspects that are being addressed in the different data management plan templates that are available out there. So as we look at data management plans specific that are for specific disciplines, this should be one of the key areas that are being addressed in each data management plan. So are you collecting or doing any citizen science under your project? And if so, these are the things that you should be looking at, and these are the questions that you should be planning for ahead. I put in something in the chat, Eva. I think your idea is very good, and possibly an alternative path, considering that there are more than 100 working and interest groups under RDA. That would be really a challenge to try to speak to all of them. But I know that there will be communities of practice being set up, so that would be another path that we might be able to take, which would be very specific, and it's currently taking off. So it's the best time to try to do it.
Okay, so because I don't remember exactly how are they going to be the communities of practice, I forget how are they going to be conceived. But do you think that there is room for being one of the communities of practice?
I think the communities of practice are disciplinary.
Yeah, that's my concern. Yeah.
From what I understand, at least the first one will be focused on agricultural related agricultural domain. Potentially that would be a good way to pilot maybe this approach. And well, I don't know, one of the recommendations could also be to address the topic of citizen science under each of these, instead of trying to draw to a common place, perhaps ensure that these are being addressed across the communities of practice.
Mm-hmm.
That would tie in very well with the structures, with the RDA structures, and a lot of the, from what I understand, obviously the communities of practice are gonna work closely with disciplinary groups, and I know that there are a few of those in RDA, but also with specific cross-cutting themes, which brings us back to your suggestion. So that might be an interesting approach.
There's a few comments coming in on the Miro board as well, around the use of FAIR and the need for that, and that's assisting in harnessing the value of citizen science. So I think that's very true, and that's been a big focus on that. But I guess the one of the challenges is the platforms, and one of the platforms citizen science use and is available for them, facilitating that as well.
Mm-hmm. I have also another approach, another question that I was thinking of that when I was listening to Joanne and to you guys and Timea. Should we consider the specificity of the data coming from citizen science practices or community participation practices as a core business? I mean, something like specific metadata because they are data from citizens, or we have to apply the principles or the treatment that we apply because of the discipline, or perhaps we need a convergence on that. That's why I'm thinking that the community of practice will be interesting, because the community of practice has the same problem that we have in citizen science. You have to address all the topics that they are important for data management. I mean, the kind of data, the metadata, the legal issues, the property, the privacy, whatever, all these things at agriculture, for example. But also, you have the same problem and you think about citizen science. So at the end, citizen science becomes something like a community of practice, transdisciplinary. I just flip the whole thinking. So it would be another approach. What is more important, that is citizen science data, or that they are data for biology produced by citizens? I don't know.
I guess the research question, or whatever the objective of the research itself, would help establish that. But again, we must have once you reach that understanding, you should be able to find the resources necessary to sort of address all the different aspects that you might be challenged with across the. So I guess we have another big question. Is it a specific question? Is it a community practice on its own, or is it a cross-disciplinary aspect that needs to be addressed?
I'm interested to hear the thoughts from the rest of the participants here. I think we've talked a fair bit. So does anybody else have thoughts on this? Vera, you want to go ahead?
I think in the end you can see it as a methodology or as an ethic question. And I think it depends on this, because if you see it as a way to getting data, well, the most important is a research goal and a research object. But then it's like a circumstance, like sometimes you are somehow involving citizens inside. But well, I've experienced from the art when they introduced the safeguardness of immaterial cultural heritage. It changed all the whole way of how to abort arts from the ministries of culture in the world. And it's very difficult. And in 10 years of existing this way of doing it, nearly no one is really. It's a great challenge, because it's changing all the way around how you work. But it's an ethic thing, and it makes a lot of to the people, and it make a lot of things to the arts. So if you see it like an ethic thing, I think it's a community of practice, because it's a particular way of seeing science and of seeing communication about science, and seeing of who is the owner of science. So then it would be an ethic thing. But on the other hand, in a lot of projects, it's a methodological thing. So it's two very different kinds of viewing it. And I think there could be a decision of, okay, what are the main focus of this two, and what we can do about this without forgetting about the other option. But I think that the decision is more, it's methodological or it's ethic. I think I made it worse, but how
No.
somehow.
Not at all.
No, I'm making the question a little bigger. It's not the answer. It's a bigger question.
Well, this might be a key, obviously a key to reading a different lens for it, and I think that it brings on a new level of well, addressing it that might leverage on other things that are available under the RDA umbrella. So very good, thank you. Tanya, I think you had a question or a comment related to Eva's presentation that we didn't touch upon. Would you like to maybe bring that up?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
So during your presentation, Eva, you mentioned that there are citizen science initiatives organized already in the US, in the EU, and in Australia. And my guess is that they've probably been discussing the types of things that are on the slide that we're looking at right now, as well as the previous ones, and that there are ongoing discussions. And maybe some of you have participated in those already. And maybe, as Kiran said, RDA could be a way to bring these groups together so that everybody's, talking about the same things and trying to make progress together. And I don't know if that's something that RDA has any pull in and saying, hey, we've organized people together before. Would you like to work together with these other groups? Or maybe there is some resistance to banding together for whatever reason. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
I agree completely what you say. Actually, bring the communities and the presentation, because we cannot reinvent the wheel, of course. But the point is that we have to open it up, because if we are trying to do open science, and citizen science is one of the core elements of open science, and open data is another core element of open science. For example, I was thinking in the European Open Science Policy Platform, RDA was one stakeholder. The European Citizen Science was another stakeholder. But probably they didn't know that they have so many things to talk together, because they are kind of actors of key issues: open data, fair data, and citizen science. But as soon as you have as an outcome, or as a methodology, or as a constituent element of the citizen science practice, the data, you have to talk to each other. So I don't know if they will approach us as, what do you do? What we have to do with data, guys? You are the ones of the data things. No, I don't think they are going to approach us. Probably we have to approach them and say, well, you have here REA, we have this community of practices, you have these things, and perhaps it's a good moment to make something together. But I'm sure that the Citizen Science Association, they talk to each other together, and they make declarations and all these things, you know, but it's a very particular community. So the idea is to bring them REA more than take them to us. Of course, we plan to invite them to this meeting, and we were thinking that it would be openly available for everybody, and instead of 16 people, we will have 160. But unfortunately, or fortunately, because this discussion is being very juicy, we couldn't invite them, but perhaps it's the moment of contacting them.
Yeah. Thanks, Eva. Look, we're getting close to the end of our time. I just wanted to remind everybody, if you could add your details onto the notes so we can be in touch with you afterwards, that'll be great. I guess the question still remains open in my head about, you know, is there interest to create something within the RDA's formal structures, or does it make sense for us to continue this discussion on a bit further and maybe bring some of the other groups in one of the future plenaries, or maybe even organize one between the plenaries to have a bit more to think about. Keen to hear thoughts on that after the discussions we've had so far.
Either one. I will organize in between plenaries another meeting, just inviting the people that they cannot attend today, something like an informal Zoom that we can organize. I'm just inviting the people attending this meeting and citizen science associations and other. We can just promote it even in REA, working groups that they are close to probably these topics and they may be interested. And also I think we need to probably have another BoF before establishing a working group to cook a bit more the idea. What do you think?
Yeah. I second Kieran's suggestion or request or invitation to leave your details in the minutes document. We'll try to set up a working area for the group on the RDA website, and then we would get a mailing list that you can sign up for, and possibly some of the resources and the recording from this can be also linked and uploaded there, and that can be at least a common place to start from. And as Eva mentioned, we can extend the invite broader and have another meeting before another plenary. Would that be?
Yeah, I think so. I think the actions arising from this, a sensible one is if we plan a session with the people who we wanted to invite for this, but we couldn't, and then get everybody from here who is interested to join as well. Then we could use that to have a slightly more broader and informed discussion about how it really fits into the RDA's structures. And then maybe by the time we get to plenary 17, we'll have a more focused, more refined discussion around how we might kickstart something.
Yep. I think that's a very good plan. Everybody agrees?
Say aye.
So Vera and Gabby, we have you on board. Joanne, you are on board already, so I'm sorry.
There's no
Good.
going.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Good.
Well, Vera and I, we work together.
Good. Very good.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Excellent. I think we're end of
Yes,
our
I
time. I'm
think-
not sure
yes.
if this ends by itself or we need to end it. But
I
look, it's been
think we are ended. Yes, I think it ends by
Yeah.
itself.
right. Look, it's been a great discussion, and I'm really glad every one of you joined in. And I can see there's still stuff coming into the Miro board as well, so that's great. So feel free to add your thoughts and comments either into the Miro board or into the notes there. And we'll take that and we'll try and organize a session between this one, before the next plenary, a broader one.
Maybe we can present ourselves and things like that.
Definitely, yeah. So we'll start planning that and then circulating that to the people who put their names down in there.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe soon you can come to Costa Rica.
Personally, I would love to do that. Yes.
Hope so.
All right.
Well,
thank you, everybody. I think I'll bring this to an end now.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks to all.
Bye. Thanks.
I don't know. I have no idea.